Let's face it, business technology is frustrating and complex. So how do you make sure it works for your team? To make IT right, start the discussion at go-domain.com. You're listening to Discussions by Domain, a podcast for business leaders. Our discussions may be with people you've probably heard of before, but the majority of our guests are in the trenches, professionals like you and I, with the same challenges and struggles of keeping up in the Northeast. They're implementing strategies, overcoming hurdles. They're leading the fastest growing businesses in our region. My name is Anthony DeGraw, Director of Partnerships at Domain Computer Services, and the host of this show. When I'm not talking with business leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of Domain and the ups and downs of our own growth journey, as we intend to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. Welcome to another episode of Discussions by Domain. I am your host, Anthony DeGraw with Domain Computer Services. And today we have the pleasure of welcoming Rebecca Fitzhugh from Sobel & Co. She is the partner in charge of the forensic accounting practice area. And today she's going to be talking about the 5 tips businesses should implement to not have to engage with a forensic accountant, which I think is a very good thing. Rebecca, welcome to the show. And maybe you could start with introducing yourself and your background and what you guys are up to at Sobel & Co. today.
Well, thank you, Anthony. I'm very pleased to be here and excited to talk about forensic accounting for people who may not know that much about it. So just a little bit of background on me is that I have been with Sobel & Company for about 18 years, and Sobel & Company is a full-service accounting firm in Livingston, New Jersey, and we do, everything that a full-service accounting firm would do, everything from your typical audit and accounting to tax preparation and consulting to forensic accounting. That includes, helping businesses untangle some crazy situations that they get into. And also, we have some valuation services here that people are buying a new business or selling a business. We can value the business for them as well. But we handle business throughout New Jersey, throughout the tri-state area, and some of our specialists have traveled as far away as India on some of our engagements. So we do pretty much anything, and we will go pretty much anywhere to help our clients.
That's outstanding. And I know Sobel's a staple here in the New Jersey business market. A very good and great organization to look up to, and with everything that you guys are doing there. So I appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us. We're going to jump right in the topic here. You have 5 points around different areas that businesses can look at to avoid having to engage with your services, which I think is absolutely amazing to point out where companies can get ahead of potentially having to engage a forensic accountant. So I'm going to let you just roll right off the top. We'll start with your first point here, and maybe you can break it down for all the business owners out there.
Okay, well, just to tell everybody why I'm covering this particular topic. I've been in forensic accounting for a long time, and it's very exciting and interesting for me, but it can be very expensive and for the clients who have to use a forensic accountant. And we usually come in when there are a lot of unpleasant issues happening, and people are emotional and angry, and they don't make the best decisions. And so while I do make my living off of these situations, I would much prefer that people were a little bit more aware and a little bit more prepared beforehand, so that they didn't really need to go down that road. Because a lot of times they could have done something very easy to prevent the need for engaging somebody like us. And usually when they are engaging a forensic accountant, it's a legal issue. So they're also paying attorney's fees, which are generally even more than the accounting fees and the forensic accountant fees. So it is something to try to avoid if at all possible. And there are some really simple things that can make people's lives very much easier. And my first tip is to make sure that the business owner has a comprehensive operating agreement when they first start a business. Now, this is coming after the fact for a lot of people who might be listening to this,
Yeah.
who have been in business for quite a number of years or may have one or multiple partners. And if you're not able to, if you're not at a point where you're just starting with an operating agreement, you can always go back and take another look and maybe revise your operating agreement. But that operating agreement, a lot of people use a very much a boilerplate type of agreement, maybe one that's kind of set forth in state laws like the LLC law. And so they don't really want to spend a lot of money when you're first going into business. And, I can see why people starting out don't have a lot of money to spend, and they want to spend it on delivering their service or producing their goods. So when you think about the legal points and the administrative things like an operating agreement, you just want to get it out of the way. You're not really looking down the road to where something might happen and you might have a disagreement with the people that you've gotten into business with. And while an operating agreement may not cover every single eventuality where you might have disagreements, you can really put together some good guidelines in order to hopefully better manage future possibilities.
Yeah.
So where I see a lot of people having issues that could have been addressed in an operating agreement is maybe how what responsibilities each individual owner might have, or how are the distributions going to be made to partners, maybe what their responsibilities are, and one of the most important parts is how a partner can buy out another partner or kick out another partner should something happen where you don't want to be in business anymore together. And a lot of times, people will use a very elementary type of buyout formula. Maybe they'll use book value, which totally doesn't address what the value of a business actually is. Some other times people may be using some multiple of EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, which again, it can be easier to calculate at the time, but it may not actually be indicative of the actual value of a business to somebody. Other operating agreements might actually call for a business valuation to be done, but then there are definitely a lot of particularities about business valuations that people who are not familiar with that field don't understand. So there are areas that you could better define when you are putting together an operating agreement. And in that case, you really do have to have somebody advising you as well who knows about it. But believe me, the more detail that you put into that operating agreement early on, the happier you'll be possibly at the end.
Yeah. Exactly what you
Go
said
ahead.
there is like I've heard of all three different ways of that, and in terms of just even valuing your business. So getting ahead of that is definitely very important. And the other issue I see with that is like most people don't go into business thinking like, hey, this is going to end tomorrow or in 15 years badly, and I need to be thinking about this now. But I think your point
Right.
on definitely updating that agreement, even or looking at it every couple of years would make sense.
Absolutely. And sometimes there are reasons to do that. And, whether that's succession planning or, maybe you've put into the operating agreement that you need to actually have the business valued every year just in case. And for, maybe estate planning or succession planning purposes. Sometimes that is the case, but it doesn't help. It doesn't hurt to dig that out at some point and go over it with your attorney, go over it with your business partner or partners, and see if there's something that you might want to change based on how your business is growing and developing, and you just never know what's going to happen in the future. So that is not something that should be a static agreement or a static document that you never look at again until something comes up in the future where you have to look back at it and make sure you know where that copy of that operating agreement is.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's a ton of good insight on just one document that probably gets looked at once, gets put into place, and like you said, it kind of gets real dusty and old somewhere, and you don't even know where it is. So definitely checking in
Right.
on those operating agreements there. Very good. And What is the next point? What's the next area that somebody should focus on before having to engage with somebody like yourself?
Right. So many times we get involved in an engagement where there is some sort of financial question, and we need to be looking at the books and records. And any number of situations can come up where you might have absolutely nobody who's really responsible for keeping track of the books and records, or you might have somebody who's very sophisticated and very knowledgeable about accounting. So the next tip is hire a bookkeeper who has some sort of accounting background and education and can properly set up your books and records and properly maintain them. Again, this is something that could be a fairly significant expense when you're just opening up a business. So many people will try to do it on their own, but you don't necessarily know when you're starting a business what all the rules and the regulations and what the financial issues are going to be that you are going to need accurate accounting information for. So frequently what we'll see is that, it's either one of the business partners who is doing the books, or they bring in a spouse or a relative or a friend who's just helping them out, and acting as their bookkeeper for a while. Or they're, they don't even have something like QuickBooks. QuickBooks, I would, has its pros and its cons, but it's a widely available accounting package that pretty much anybody can get their hands on. And it's fairly simple to use. It's not it can handle some more sophisticated types of businesses. When you get to a certain point, you're probably not going to want to use QuickBooks anymore. But, it really does help to actually have something like that to track your expenses and your income, and making sure that you actually record things properly and you have an accurate chart of accounts that's set up, and some reporting that you can generate from QuickBooks or from whatever accounting package you have. Because not only is it important for you to keep track of your income and expenses for tax purposes, but that's important information for actually managing your business and understanding whether you are successful or not. It may look like you're bringing in plenty of cash, but if you don't understand where that's going and what is happening with that, you're not going to be able to really accurately measure how your business is doing on a financial basis. So between just being able to keep track of all of your dollars and cents and where it's going and where it's coming from, to, being able to tell what your profit margin is and then benchmark against other companies in your industry and understand just how well you are doing, or whether you have some sort of competitive advantage because of, maybe certain knowledge that you have at your company. That can show up in the financial reports that you end up generating and to help you manage your business. Just as an example, we have a case that's going on right now where a business owner has claimed that they're not being reimbursed properly for certain things by another entity, but at the same time, they don't have the appropriate records to be able to make that judgment.
Yeah.
So they're not keeping track of their own costs properly. So how can you claim that you're not, that somebody reimbursing you is not covering your costs if you don't even know what they are? So there are a lot of areas where decent bookkeeping and accurate bookkeeping are really going to help you a lot.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And I think, there's got to be a place where all the facts lie and all the data lies, so that everybody can look at it and agree on this is the data and this is where we store it. And everybody agrees on what goes in and out of this. And that's what we're going to use.
Books and records, when you have a disagreement and you know that they're accurate and you know that they reflect what's really happening, it does make it a lot easier if you do get into some sort of argument about it.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you did recommend that eventually there's a point at which a business probably, I want to say, graduates from QuickBooks. Just wanted to get off the top of your head what recommendations, or maybe at what revenue level or profitability level, and what recommendations you would have for that.
Well, it's very much specific to the business and the industry.
Okay.
Because there are certain industries, we'll say construction, where something like QuickBooks might be okay for a while you're pretty small, but then as you start graduating to bigger jobs where you might have multi-year contracts that you need to keep track of your profitability from year to year in order to report it properly for the tax purposes, you might want a specific construction-related software.
Gotcha.
Because QuickBooks might not be able to handle that. If you're, say, a manufacturer with inventory needs, QuickBooks might not work for you beyond a certain number, just because it really it would depend on the type of inventory you have, the number of different products and product lines, and how complex your situation is. So you really can't judge based on a revenue number when that would happen, but you'll be able to tell when your business starts, when it's not as easy, when you can't get the information out of the system or into the system the way, that will help you. You'll be able to tell pretty quickly.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Very good point. I think it's also a basis of like operational maturity within an organization when it's time to go out and towards your second point here, get a bookkeeper with some knowledge in this industry and kind of offload. You probably didn't get in to the business you're in to do bookkeeping. And it definitely makes sense at a certain point to get somebody with those skill sets on board that everybody's agreeing on.
Right. Because if you have, an accounting package that you're using, you want to get the most out of it. You don't want to just use it as a checkbook, because that's not going to be helpful to you in terms of growing your business and understanding how successful you really are.
Makes sense. I want to wrap things up for you to get you on with the rest of your day, but I don't want to do that without talking about an organization that you support, and definitely want to let our audience know about them, and that is the Partners for Women in Justice. Can you touch on them a little bit and where our audience can find out more about them?
Absolutely. So Partners for Women in Justice is a nonprofit that is currently located in Bloomfield, New Jersey. And they provide pro bono, which means free, legal services to victims of domestic violence, low-income victims of domestic violence, and mostly in a few counties in New Jersey, Union County, Essex County, Hudson County, and I feel like I'm missing Middlesex as well. And the majority of what we do is help people get restraining orders against their abusers. And actually getting those restraining orders really helps them move on with their lives and helps them feel secure so that they're able to get their children out of bad situations, get their education finished, perform their jobs better, and just get out of a really bad situation. And, we also pursue advocacy efforts around certain issues such as bail reform, child support, and educating judges who are in the domestic violence circuit so that they understand what the issues are. Because there are some very specific issues that surround domestic violence cases that are not typical, and your typical criminal case is not the same as a domestic violence case. So sometimes, judges are rotated through different types of courts, so from family to criminal to civil. And we just want to make sure that, they understand when they're coming into the family court situation and dealing with domestic violence cases, that they understand the particularities that really surround them. So we're doing a lot to try to improve how things are done in New Jersey. And it takes a lot of effort, and the organization has grown so much over the past, since it was founded, and we're really proud of it.
That's awesome. Where can people learn more about them?
It's pfwj.org.
Got it. Thank you. Now that sounds great. And our organization Domain does a ton of work and sits on the board of an organization here in Mercer County called Women's Space that has a similar type of mission in terms of providing housing and everything like that to help women in these situations. So very good. Tie them in together, and it works well. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. This guarantees that every episode will get delivered directly to your device. To help us get the word out, share with a friend, leave a review, and check out our discussions on the web at go-domain.com/podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.